And the reality is that the people of Iran, they understand that no one's going to hand us freedom in a silver platter, that we have to pay the price ourselves. And they're willing to pay that price. And that was something that the world saw in January too, with, the thousands and thousands of people who were killed in the streets, and the 50,000 people who've been arrested in these protests, and their lives are on the line right now. But I think what gives people, Iranians, hope is the fact that they understand that after 100 years of living under two dictatorships, both the mullahs and the Shah, we have finally reached the place that they want to move forward to a secular democratic republic. And that roadmap is clear. There is the actual alternative, a viable alternative that can bring about that change and make sure that democracy is guaranteed. And the fact that the National Council of Resistance Iran actually has a plan for a provisional government, a 6-month provisional government, to actually be able to transfer sovereignty and power to the people of Iran. And the fact that there's, that 10-point plan presented by Mrs. Rajavi that kind of served as the guidelines to make sure that we're on the right path. Many lawmakers have called it, Jeffersonian, because it sets that structure and that roadmap to make sure that we're on the right line. It calls for, separation of religion and state. It calls for free elections. It calls for people's sovereignty. It calls for independent judiciary. It calls for the abolition of the death penalty and executions in Iran. It calls for, gender equality and the rights of minorities, be it religious or ethnic minorities in Iran. So it's a clear roadmap, and it also calls for non-nuclear Iran. And what's important is that it's not just mere words or just written statements. It's something that people have seen in action by this movement for decades. It had withstood the test of time. And I think that's really key. And that's something that gives people the hope that they're willing to make those sacrifices for, because they understand that, that the dawn of freedom is near. We just have to put in that effort and pay the price for it.
And that's, like you said, you've been under 100 years of dictatorship, but now you have a roadmap to a free, secular democracy in Iran. You have the people want to see that, and they're moving forward with it. And then there's the fact that the government is fractured from all that's going on right now. And you said communication is key. What could the world do to bring together the people of Iran with communication? We got the war aspect going already. What could they do? How could they provide the communication support this movement needs to move forward? Because like you said, now the opportunity is really there. The government has never been weaker and the people have never been stronger. But the one thing they're lacking is the ability to communicate. With a 20-day blackout, well, now we're at a 33-day blackout on the internet. What would it take to get these people to be able to communicate in a big way? And the minute they communicate, they organize in a big way.
What we're seeing on the ground is people are mobilizing, and they are communicating in that regard and trying to put that together. So they're mobilizing to be able to enter a new phase in their resistance to this regime. This was, we saw signs of that even 5 days before the start of the war, or about a week before the start of the war, with the protests that broke out in the universities in Iran, and simultaneously an attack that was carried out by 250 members of resistance units against the headquarters of Khamenei 5 days before the war. So simultaneously, within 2-3 days, we saw protests forming again, and also these operations together. And unfortunately, all of that has kind of been stopped right now due to there's a war. So people have to take refuge.
Yeah.
And practically a lot of people have had to leave even major cities and everything. So it's not possible right now to do anything by the people right now when there are bombs over their heads. So I think communication, first of all, I think there is a lot that the international community can do in that regard. Till now, the case has been that technology has come to the aid of the regime instead of to the aid of the people of Iran. For instance, all of the technology that the Iranian regime is using for face recognition to break down, crack down on people, surveillance, everything, it is being provided by Western governments to, or companies to the Iranian regime. So all of that needs to stop. I think the US and the EU have placed the IRGC on the terrorist list. The UK is still dragging its feet even after everything that is going on right now. But that needs to happen because Iran's economy is in the hands of the IRGC. On the other hand, providing right now, I think for everyone, we can't even imagine our lives like a few days without the communication possibilities that we have right now, be it internet, social media, all of that. There are workarounds, and the international community can provide that during these circumstances. But they have not yet done so because they don't want to get into that with the Iranian regime. Right now is the time to do that and be able to give the people of Iran that possibility. And as I said, I think that it's very important, and that when we look at it from a political perspective, one of the most the easiest things that governments could do. First of all, governments shouldn't be deciding for the people of Iran like what is to come. That is something that the people of Iran have to decide themselves. But understand and recognize the fact that the people of Iran want to move forward to a secular democratic republic. Those three words are very key because secular, because we have current theocracy, there needs to be a separation of religion and state in Iran. So when we say secular democratic republic, that means again theocracy.
I'm not
Democratic
against
means
theocracy, but theocracy doesn't rule, right?
that theocracy will that means like religious rule. We're not against religion, but we
Right.
believe that
There
religion is
should
a
be a
principle.
separation.
There's the separation of religion and state. It has no place in governing the country. Democracy because we're against all forms of dictatorship, and republic because we also don't want to go back to the previous monarchy, which was also a dictatorship. So secular democratic republic is like that key phrase. You have to watch for all three aspects of that. But also I think it's, the international community can voice their support for the people of Iran, recognize their right to resist, recognize the provisional government presented by Mrs. Rajavi, condemn these executions, hold the regime accountable for, the crimes that they're perpetrating, both crimes against humanity and war crimes that they're committing. And that in itself is like the greatest help that they can provide to the people of Iran. So governments can do that, lawmakers can do that. The media can play a major role in presenting the actual facts of what is going on in Iran, because there's a lot of disinformation out there. There's a lot of different narratives that are being pushed. It's really important to keep everyone aware and for them to understand, like, what is this situation that we're looking for? Why are Iranians bent on this issue of, having independence and to be able to create change themselves? What is that history behind it? To understand the fact that if you look in the last 100 years, Reza Khan, he was brought in in a coup d'etat by the British. Once he wasn't serving their purposes anymore, he was taken out. His son replaced him, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and then he didn't have a very strong foothold on power. So that's why people in Iran were able to push for that constitutional revolution that they had wanted. So Dr. Mossadegh was the only democratic prime minister that we had that was chosen by the people of Iran. And he was taken out because he nationalized Iran's oil. And that was not to the interest of the West. And so, unfortunately, since then, after the coup d'etat by the US and the UK, the Shah ruled with the iron fist and the Sabak and the crimes that were perpetrated. And then the people of Iran revolted and threw that out. But unfortunately, it was the Cold War era. And so Khomeini was brought in. Why? Because Western governments at that time were like, the Shah is about to be ousted. What are we going to replace? Because the fact that the reality was those who had created this revolution were progressive movements, different groups who have worked together and were coming together to overthrow the Shah. But, the West wasn't really sure, like, where do they align themselves with in the Cold War or whatnot. So they figured Khomeini, who was a fundamentalist, he would probably be better for them because he would be against the USSR. And so Khomeini was brought in and he was implemented on the people of Iran. And so unfortunately, we've been paying that price for 47 years now. So this time, the people of Iran want to take matters into their own hands. They want to be able to decide their destiny themselves. And I think it's really important to understand that and recognize that and to understand what is at play right now and why it is that the people of Iran, like one of the main chants in the protest in Iran was down with the oppressor, be it the Shah or the mullahs, or neither the crown nor the turban want freedom and equality. That needs to be recognized and allow the people of Iran to push forward on that